Sometimes I feel that I could fight an army with just me and you, and there's no one could harm me. Oh, but sometimes I can feel a little shy. It's then I need to know that you are there. That's why I'm singing, be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, be with me, be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, be my only God. I know you said that I would not be tested more than I could bear, and that you had my best in mind with everything that ever comes my way. I know you're in control, so hear me as I pray. I'm singing, be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, be with me, be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, be my only God. Now help me, Lord, to share what I've been given. Help me make a difference with the life I'm living. As I show my neighbor where true treasure stored, help me know you promised to be with me, Lord. I'm singing, be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, be with me, be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. Be with me, be my only God.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He should give His only Son to make a wretch His treasure. How great the pain of searing loss! The Father turns His face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon a cross, my sin upon His shoulders. Ashamed I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held Him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished.
Good morning, everyone, to our live stream service. My name is Richard Buckner, one of the evangelists here at GPCC. I'm here to preach this morning. We are in Ecclesiastes, and it's been some great work with Ecclesiastes. Hopefully you have enjoyed the lessons. And for those of us who are still joining us online, thank you. Thank you that you're able to connect with us. For whatever reason you find yourself here, whether you've been invited, whether you're one of our members and just can't or not unable to make it out, and this is a great resource for you and to help you connect your faith. I'm so glad you're here. Again, if you're visiting with us, please get connected with us through our website, and someone will reach out to you and just fill you in on the things that we're doing. Love to get you connected to our church family. Well, let's hop on in. There's a lot to get through, and we have a really great chapter. I mean, it's the Bible, right? What else are you going to say? I mean, it is. The Bible is awesome. and specifically Ecclesiastes, it's awesome. And so what we're going to do today is we're just going to just read the chapter, take some stops along the way, illuminate the scriptures, bring notice to certain things, but really just the way the chapter plays out, we're just going to get the flow of it. And the reason for that is in this chapter, again, the whole theme is the teacher, which I believe is Solomon. Some people may debate that. You have Solomon, who's, if you're not familiar with Solomon, the Bible describes him as the wisest person that ever lived, right outside of Jesus. Very wealthy, king of Israel at the time. And Ecclesiastes is kind of his commentary on what life is, life under the sun, as a person in perspective that's done everything. And so we're going to take off from that. And what's different about chapter 7 than the previous chapters is that, Solomon's pretty down on how things are in life and the meaningless of life, right? There's a Hebrew word, hevel, which means more than just meaningless. It's dynamic in many ways. It can mean kind of confusion, absurdity, just a bewilderment of what is going on. Not necessarily like life has no meaning. I think that Solomon is commenting life has a lot of meaning. He just doesn't know it. And he tries to approach it from a wisdom perspective, but there's just certain things that wisdom can't answer, which actually we're going to get to in this particular chapter. And so the way this chapter lays out different than the others is that you can go verse by verse and it plays out more like a proverb. And if you read the book of Proverbs, there's kind of these like one-hit verses, right? Not full context, but just a stanza of boom, boom. And then you go on to the next verse, boom, boom. And it's not a full contextual thing. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to hop in and dive on in it. And hopefully, again, you have your Bibles, your phones, whatnot. There'll be some scriptures on screen for you. But we're just going to go right through. So let's hop in. We're going to start off in Ecclesiastes chapter 7 in verse 1. And we're going to break these up in different titles. And then, like I said, we'll just take some stops to illuminate, bring out the aroma of the scriptures and see what we can learn from it. And in Ecclesiastes chapter 7 in verse 1, it says, "A good name is better than fine perfume, and a day of death is better than a day of birth. It is better to go into the house of mourning than to go in the house of feasting. For death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart. Frustration is better than laughter, because a sad face is good for the heart. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of pleasure." And so let's take just a break here. And again, the overall theme as we dive in, as you start to see, is kind of the wise and foolish life. But really it's the perspective of the wise and how they approach life, how they view life. Again, it's Solomon looking out of the course of his adventures and experiences and ups and downs and good choices, bad choices. And he's giving us, it's kind of sitting on the porch and he's giving us a talking to of what life is and warning us to steer clear. And we definitely get this in just these few 4 verses. And it breaks down in some of the titles that came to mind when I was thinking through just these 4 verses. The first is, "A great reputation is better than wealth." When he talks about a good name is better than fine pearls, that's what it translates into, our terminology today. And the reason being is because, again, a great reputation, that's a good name, is better than wealth. And that's the symbolism of perfume. Perfume represented luxury and wealth in the ancient world. When you went to banquets in the ancient world, you often were treated by the host with these amazing, expensive oils that you would be either put on your forehead or you were to put over you. And it's, as you walked around, you smelled of the king. You smell like royalty, and it just followed you around. Again, it's that idea and symbolism of wealth. There's a lot of that when you read in the scriptures. I'm reminded of in the New Testament with the sinful woman and breaking the alabaster jar of perfume on Jesus' feet. And the disciples were freaking out, like, oh my goodness, or not even disciples, everybody. Like, how can she do this? That's a year's wages. I don't know how much you make in a year, but I can't imagine dropping that much money on perfume. But again, that it's a sign of wealth. This perfume would provide a glistening and a sheen to whoever would wear it at the party or at the banquet. And again, drawing attraction to them. Again, like I said, the scent will follow you around. However, the teacher, Solomon, gives high regard for the person who has reputation versus the person of wealth. Well, why is that? And when I was praying and thinking and reading through this, these are things that came to mind, is that a good reputation lasts longer, right? And it's subtle, but man, you dying as someone being known and having a good reputation will spread farther than expensive perfume. Expensive perfume fades, and it's even kind of I think, a wink to the whole book in that term that we talked about, the Hebrew word hevel, and that, this perfume is here and gone, is literally mist. That kind of like James talks about how our life is a mist. The perfume would only provide a fading and fleeting sense of aroma, but your reputation as a person, again, can last many lifetimes, depending on how awesome you were in your life. And I think for us, we got to ask the question: how much time do we spend on building our wealth versus building a good reputation? And obviously we're reading out of Ecclesiastes. Solomon is touching a lot of things. I don't think he's exclusively religious in the sense. He's just talking about how to live a good life and good practicals that anyone really can put into practice. But I think when it comes to scriptures, investing in a good reputation has to come down to following Jesus. That's what's going to give you the good reputation. Because who are you trying to impress? Well, it's us glorifying God. And I think that speaks even volumes than, again, building our lives here on earth. I think that's something that we've got to ask ourselves the question, what am I building here on my time on earth? Am I investing more into what the world's offering in the wealth and riches? And then when I say riches, I'm not talking about, your Elon Musk rich, but it's just investing in things that will fade away, just like the perfume in the scripture. Jesus stressed this when he talked about cleaning the inside of the cup instead of the outside of the cup. This is right up the same thinking in terms of a good reputation is better than perfume. I think we've got to make sure where we're investing our time. The next part, it talks about entering death is better than entering life. When I thought of this, it's, one's birth is the beginning of their sorrows, but one's death is the beginning of kind of the afterlife, right? And depending on how you built that is very important. And that's what's being communicated. You're born into this world, and it's a crazy world. I mean, just look around, turn on the news. There's a lot happening in our world today. And being born in this world, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of strife. I think, when I have two kids, 10 and, just turned 10, and one will be 12 here next month. It's crazy. And man, when my wife and I were deciding to have kids, we did think about, like, man, it's a really crazy world to bring them in. And both my wife and I of both mixed race, and so knowing that they would even struggle with that. My wife being white and I being black, and our kids being mixed, and what kind of world will they experience? And so, yeah, I mean, it's being born into this world. There's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of stress. I still want to have children. I still am hopeful for their lives, and hopefully they will grow up to glorify God and want to be Christians. But I know what they're up against, because the world is a dark world. But one's death, when I think of being a Christian, I think of the scripture in Paul and Philippians 1, 21. He's like, man, to live is Christ, to die is gain. And one's death, in the context when you view it through the Christian lens, is far better, right, than one's birth. Because death for the Christian means life with God. Now, it's not that way if you're not, right with God. There's a much different outcome in that. The next point within these 4 verses is that a sober reflection of death is better than a life fixed on frivolity. And this is the part towards the end of the verse where it talks about that the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, and the heart of the fool is in the house of pleasure. And I thought about that, like that's how I translate is that, man, a sober reflection on death and my mortality is better than a life fixed on frivolity. Frivolity meaning that I'm in the excess. I'm just all about having fun and partying and just living in the moment. YOLO, right? And it's like, no, that could be taken away from me at any moment. And if I'm not planning for my death, right, it sounds morbid, but a lot of people do that in many ways as they approach the end of their lives, whether it's retirement, whether it's their life insurance, whether it's settling their own accounts for their children or family members that will inherit, or business partners that will inherit whatever they've built. It's kind of wise practice when you start to get of a certain age, or even before that, to be thinking about those things. Well, here's Solomon saying that the life that he's lived, he's like, you need to have a sober judgment and reflection on death itself. Well, why? Because people who understand and realize their mortality and the scope of their lives are more apt to taking their life seriously. Versus just partying up and living in the moment, you think this will always happen. I remember when I was younger, and it's funny saying that now, man, when I was younger, I thought, man, I'll live forever. You feel that way. You're not, but you feel that way. And in so doing, you're not taking serious the moments. Like, I wish I saved more as a young person. I wish I'd planned more. I wish I took my studies more serious as a young person. How are you viewing your life? Have you planned for the afterlife? Have you planned? Do you live your life in respect of, man, I only got a few years, however long that is. Now you may say, hey, man, I'm 21. You still got a few years in respect to the history of humanity. It will be like a mist, like James talks about. We got to start focusing, not necessarily on death, but you need to start focusing, am I building towards God? Am I building towards a life that really glorifies Him? Because you're going to spend more time dead than you are alive. Let's continue reading in verses 5 and 7 here. And 5 says, better to heed a rebuke of the wise person than to listen to the song of fools. The crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of fools. This too is meaningless. Extortion turns a wise person into a fool, and the bribe corrupts the heart. And the thought that I thought through these verses were constructive criticism is better than praise from fools. Constructive criticism is better than praise from fools. A wise person invites constructive criticism, invites discipling, invites people in their lives to say, hey, how can I be better? What can I work on? And in so doing, they grow and they change. But the unwise live off the praise of fools. They because of their insecurity, because of their weak ego, because of who they are, and maybe they're guilty of how they're living, they surround themselves with yes people, right? And you won't get anywhere with that. You don't truly change if that's how you operate in your life. Do you seek advice from people who aren't afraid to tell you what they think? I know it's gotten me very far. And when I know the times that I'm struggling, whether in my personal walk with God or in my marriage, it's because I've stopped seeking advice. I've stopped going to people who I know will tell me the truth. Because we can just get out there. I know I can. Again, without the guardrails, without the great people, men and women around me, directing me and helping me stay focused on God, I can get to a place where I insulate myself, where I don't want to hear anything that's contrary or anything that's going to challenge me. And if you're there, that's a bad place. That's not a healthy place. You want people that are going to be loving but honest with you. Let's continue on. And verse 8 of chapter 7 says, the end of the matter is better than the beginning, and patience is better than pride. I mean, you can just put that on a plaque. That's amazing. And I thought of this is how your life ends matter more than how you start, right? I mean, that itself is profound. You know, the wise, again, from Solomon's perspective, he's like the wise, they look at their lives starting from the end, working backwards, right? You're planning for the end, working backwards, versus only worried about the moment. Again, we talked about that earlier. What are you building towards? Again, the goal of the Christian should be heaven. Our end is already laid out, and it's a pretty amazing ending. Are we building towards that? The unwise focus on the things of the now, the things in the moment, things that they can get and gain right away versus the long-term benefit that lies ahead. Again, it limits their perspective because of their focus. If I'm focused on what's ahead of me, then I'm striving there and I can get through the obstacles. If I only focus what's in front of me, then I lose sight on everything around me. And we got to be careful for that. And it leads to the other point of patience being better than pride. Why? Because the wise person has the end in mind. They're willing to delay gratification for the greater glory versus the person who just wants it now. And I'm reminded of all those scenarios I think you've seen where they put kids in a room and set a candy in the middle of the table and tell them, hey, you can't eat it. If you don't eat the candy, you'll get more. You'll get it multiplied, right? There's benefits to waiting, delaying the gratification. And it's comical because these kids, they can't control themselves. But it's always it's that one kid that gets more candy. Like, that's character, right? Even at a young age. Like, that's awesome. How patient are you? That's what I have to ask myself. How patient am I? And I'm not, man. I can struggle with that. I want the immediate. We live in an immediate society. Geez, in my pocket I have this powerful tool of a smartphone that I can look up any information anytime that I want. Right? I can look up sports scores. I can go on YouTube and watch videos. I can go and watch full-on movies. I have a library of like Disney Plus, that has Star Wars and Marvel and Pixar at my disposal. These moving pictures at my disposal. We live in a world it's immediate gratification, and it's harder and harder to be patient. We've got to fight for patience, especially as Christians. And if you're not a Christian, I encourage you to study the Bible. Because, man, the world, it seems like you can be in a fog if you don't have the lighthouse or the light at the end of the tunnel, and that is Jesus. But I digress. Let's continue on. In verse 10, we'll skip down to verse 10 of chapter 7. It says, do not say, where are the old days better than these? Why were the old days better than these? For it is not the wise to ask such questions. And this is one of those kind of age-old things where you can get to a place where you're like, man, the best days, the better days for me were in the past, and you can linger on those things. And it's like, why? No, the best days for us are ahead. That's how the wise think. The wise doesn't dwell. No matter how awesome the past was, the wise, they don't dwell there. They look ahead. The best days are ahead. If you're living in the past, it takes your focus off the future. Again, great practical wisdom that can fit whether you're Christian or not. Great wisdom to have in life. But if you're a Christian, feeds into what we talked about previously about heaven. Let's continue reading. In verse 11 and 12, it says, wisdom is like an inheritance It is a good thing and benefits those who see the sun. Wisdom is a shelter as money is a shelter. But the advantage of knowledge is this: wisdom preserves those who have it. And this is a great few verses here. I'm just talking the benefits of wisdom. And the thing that came to mind, the title that rang was, Wisdom is the best investment. And I repeat that. Wisdom is the best investment. Now I would say the only worthwhile investment, right? Wisdom leading, to God. We live in a time where our economy has gone up and down and through inflation and pandemic, and it's crazy, right? This influx that's happening. I mean, I feel like I'm driving by my gas station and it's up 20 cents, it's down 10 cents, it's up 20. It's like, what is going on in our world? You've experienced a lot. Even recently, you've had certain banks on the West Coast that have just completely capsized. And people are, at times going to be freaking out. Stock market, going bananas at times. And we can see the result of bad investments. I just think of cryptocurrency. Now, I'm saying it may not make a roaring comeback, but man, were people just going headlong into that area. And they're putting their homes up in portions for cryptocurrency, and just seeing so much devastation because of bad investment. However, wisdom is a sure investment. It gives us an advantage. Why? Because it truly protects those who have it. And Solomon in Proverbs 4 stresses this to no end. You can go back and read it, the whole chapter. He's like, you get wisdom at any cost, summing that up. We should strive for it, strive in attaining wisdom. But that wisdom, not just getting the worldly wisdom, this wisdom is a wisdom that you want to get from God. The Bible speaks that God being the epitome of wisdom. God, again, there's a ton of scriptures you see on screen of God being incredibly wise. And again, when you take some time this week, go through these scriptures and be inspired about God's wisdom. Wisdom starts with God. It talks about the fear of the Lord. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. I got scriptures on screen for that. Go back and read those. And then lastly, it talks about how God gives wisdom to us, right? You don't even have to go very far. And I'm not saying that books outside of the Bible and education, all that is something you don't strive for. If you have the advantage and the luxury to do that, do it. But what I'm saying, man, God is like, he's doling out wisdom from the scriptures when we dive in. There's so much wisdom for life. There's a lot of wisdom in different areas, but there's just so much wisdom for practical life and the human emotions, the human experience. It's just incredible. Let's continue reading here as we start to finish up. And we're going to drop down to 16 and 18. And I love this section here. And it's probably something you may be familiar with. It's something that's read quite a bit. But in 16 and 18 it says, do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It is good to grasp the one and let go of the other. For whoever fears God would avoid all extremes. And that really distills down wisdom, right? Not going here, but staying in a place of really being balanced in our lives, avoiding the extremes. Because immaturity is extremes, right? Immaturity shows of you going after the extreme. Wisdom is someone who's balanced. And embodying wisdom and being wise is someone who's balanced. And we definitely get that from our God Almighty. Let's end here. And towards the end of the chapter, Solomon takes a turn, right? He builds up all this stuff about wisdom, and then at the end, he just takes a complete turn. Let's read it. In verse 23, it says, I have tested wisdom, and I said, I am determined to be wise. But this was beyond me. Wherever exists is far off and most profound, who can discover? So I turn my mind to understanding, investigate, and search out wisdom and the scheme of things to understand the stupidity of wickedness and the madness of folly. I find more bitter than death the woman who is in a snare, whose heart is a trap, whose hands are free of chains. The man who pleases God will escape her, but the sinner will be in a snare. Look, says the teacher, this is what I've discovered. And adding one thing to another to discover the scheme of things. While I was still searching, but not finding, I found one upright man among 1,000, but no upright woman among them all. This I have found. God created mankind upright, but they have gone and searched for many schemes. And this is, in the end, Solomon has this turn where he's like, at the end of the day, where did my wisdom get me? That his wisdom kept searching and searching and searching and trying to find, but there were certain things that wisdom couldn't answer, right? Certain things that wisdom couldn't give answers for. And that's the limitations of human wisdom. And that's why I kept inserting God's wisdom and searching and going after God. Because at a certain point, human wisdom is left wanting. There's a lot of wise and smart people in this world that still do dumb things. And I would contend that wisdom from the scriptures and being led by God's word truly makes you wise. It truly makes you wise. Not saying that you're going to be perfect, but man, it truly makes you wise. And to see the world for what it is. Again, there's just some great scriptures to be pulled in and to understand and to see. But in conclusion with this, I think this all points to, because of the limitation of human wisdom, it all points to we need to strive for God's wisdom instead of the human wisdom. Again, I'm reminded by Proverbs 4:7, where it says, the beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, that it costs you all you have, get understanding. And I believe not understanding from a human perspective, but wisdom and understanding from a God's perspective. And I love John 8:31-32, where it talks about, really holding to Jesus' teachings, and then you'll know the truth. It's wisdom, and the truth will set you free. We've got to be exhausting ourselves for God's wisdom, not human wisdom, not to get ahead in the world, not even for what foolish people go after and just living in the moment. We've got to go after God's wisdom, because that wisdom is the wisdom that will preserve and protect us. This will lead us to the answers that we're searching for. And this will lead us through the fog, and if you remember the Hebrew word hevel, to get out of a world where we're not stuck and thinking, man, this is meaningless. What am I doing? Does it matter? It does when you have the perspective and view of God. And so I encourage you, go through the scriptures on screen, go through and connect. It's an awesome chapter, an awesome book. And if you're just catching with us, go back and watch some of the lessons previously. It's a great series that we're doing right now, and I'm so glad that you were here. I'm so glad to be able to speak and preach you today, and I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. Thank you for joining us. Thanks again for joining our live stream service. We have discussion questions located in the description for deeper reflection on today's sermon. If you're visiting with us and you want to get connected, you can visit our website at gpcc.org, click on the Contacts tab, and send us your information. And we will reach out and connect with you as soon as possible. We will end with one last song to end our live stream service. We are encouraged you joined us this morning, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Trouble in my way, praising time. I gotta praise Him time. Trouble in my way, praising time. I gotta praise Him time. I lay awake at night. That's alright. But Jesus, He will fix it. But Jesus, He will fix it. My Jesus, he will fix it in a while, in a while. Troubles in my way. I gotta sing sometime. Troubles in my way. I gotta sing sometime. I lay awake at night, but that's alright. My Jesus, he will fix it. My Jesus, he will fix it. My Jesus, he will fix it in a while, in a while. Temptations in my way. I gotta live by faith. Temptations in my way. I gotta live by faith. I can't sleep at night, but that's alright. My Jesus, he will fix it. My Jesus, he will fix it. My Jesus, he will fix it in a while, in a while. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I remember the cross. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but I remember the cross. I lay awake at night, but that's alright. My Jesus, he will fix it. My Jesus, he will fix it. My Jesus, he will fix it in a while, in a while. My Jesus, he will fix it. My Jesus, he will fix it. My Jesus, he will fix it in a while, in a while. My Jesus, he will fix it. My Jesus, he will fix it. My Jesus, he will fix it.